What's the price of ignoring the carpet bombing of Aleppo? For residents of what was Syria's most populous city, the answer is obvious. We can show you the scene as the Assad government and Russia are blamed for an umpteenth targeting of a hospital on Monday. What can locals do? In the 90s, Vladimir Putin flattened the Chechen capital, Grozny. Here, we're talking about a 6,000-year-old city that was the country's commercial capital. What'll be left of old Aleppo once the dust has settled? After a Black Monday for U.S.-Russia relations that saw Washington once and for all sever Syria truce talks and Moscow suspend a bilateral deal to decommission weapons-grade plutonium, forgotten is the talk of red lines like in 2013. So what about calls by some, even petitions for a humanitarian aid corridor? Well, one U.S. presidential candidate, libertarian Gary Johnson, recently asked, what is Aleppo? Today in the France 24 debate, our panel is going to answer. With us, activist and lecturer Abdelkader Zalka, former member of the Bedouin Council in Aleppo. Thank you for being with us.
Oh, thank you.
Also joining us, Régis Le Sommier, Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Paris Match, whose reporting from there is in last week's edition of the French News Weekly magazine. Thank you for being with us. From Chicago, we're going to be joined by Dr. Zaher Saloul, Senior Advisor to the Syrian American Medical Society, and from Beirut, Alison Muse, who reports for U.S. broadcaster National Public Radio, the France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag F24Debate. Yeah, it was the second time in days that Sakur Hospital was targeted. Before we talk about that, I got to say, Abdelkader Azalka, I should begin with condolences. Your grandfather was killed just a couple days ago.
Yeah, exactly yesterday morning. He was killed by a cluster bomb in Beidi neighborhood, in my neighborhood.
He was living in the neighborhood. He had decided to stay, or he couldn't get out?
Yeah, you can say he decided to stay because, you know, people there, they don't have any options to leave. It's besieged from the Russians and the regime, and people can't get out. So people are dying because there is no road to go out of Aleppo.
Do you know more about the circumstances?
Can you be more specific?
More about the circumstances of his death.
Yeah, he was he was exactly sitting in front of his house when the airstrike, a drone, you know, targeted the neighborhood. It's completely civilians. And they targeted, you know, and the cluster bombs is go a lots of damage, even if you were like far 100 meters or something. And he was hit by a small meteor from the bomb in his head, and he was dead.
He was sitting outside, you say?
Yeah, he was sitting outside.
People are going outside even though there's been relentless shelling.
Yeah, it's something you can say it's something normal life. Now it's becoming a normal life because, you know, it's a daily bombing. People need to get out to look for food, to even to see each other. You know, you can't be locked in your house for 24 hours per day. So he was just sitting in front of his door. And he's an old man. He's more than 85 years old. And he was killed. And he did nothing. Yeah.
Régis Le Sommier, when you were in Aleppo, did you see this? You were on the government side from where you reported. People still insisting on going out even when it was dangerous.
Yes, I mean, people are going out. I mean, from what I saw, I couldn't go on the rebel side, but I could hear the airstrikes very, very vividly, especially at night, and I've heard some some sort of different shells that were used probably by Russian airstrike in order, I guess, to target the network of tunnels, which for sure the rebels have dug all around the city. you have to, what I witnessed is also a lot of shelling from the rebels on the side where we were. Our hotel was hit. We had 2 workers that were severely wounded by I mean, just where we were there. So we followed them to the hospital, and we witnessed them being cured over there. So it's a situation where everybody in this city, but I must say that, you know, right now the situation on the eastern side is of course a lot. There's a lot more casualties in the eastern side than on the government side, but there was a lot of casualties on the government side. I just give a figure, you know, talking about children, because the number of children have been killed recently. The Observatory for Human Rights, which is a group close to the opposition, gave the figure of 59 children in July killed on the government side. So meaning, and about the same number of people for August, for the 21st day of August, of 165 on the government side and 168 on, which means that actually the rebels also have artillery. I saw what kind of weapon they send on the government side. So you have what's called the cannon hails, which is famous because it's a missile with a gas bottle, and it's really badly damaged some of the building. And the ones I saw were very heavy caliber, like 200 millimeter caliber, and it was not mortar, it was shells. And so this must have come from a piece of artillery. So the rebels have artillery. The only thing they don't have is air power.
Which
can I jump in here? How can you be sure about your hotel was being hit from the rebels held area?
Do you want me? I mean, I don't have the picture here, but I can tell you why. Why would the government hit its own population?
Because you are a foreign journalist, and they want to show you that they are a victim. Of course.
No. I mean, I'm a seasoned war reporter. I know when I'm being fooled by a regime or by some form of government. You know, don't take me for a fool. I know what I'm doing. I've been there. I've been on the ground many times.
Okay.
I know when it's a show. This was not a show. And there's another situation that I witnessed, is the lack of everything. The people over there have, you know, there's less and less food. When we were there on Friday, the 23rd, the water, the running water in the city was completely shut down by the rebels because they have the entrance to the main, and so there was no more water for a few days in the city. Now I believe the water has returned, but so it's constant, and the people, you know, you cannot deny that they're suffering on both sides, and it has been going on for quite a while. Now, the airstrike is a different element. I don't deny that. I don't deny that the eastern part is really targeted. And I can tell you, we couldn't sleep at night.
Let's show our viewers this. Let's show our viewers this because just to get a sense, Aleppo was the commercial capital of Syria before the war. Population 2.1 million. Now it's estimated that it's 250,000 people who live there. The rebels, as Régis Le Sommier said, reduced to an enclave that's in the eastern part of the city. And we could just tell you the latest from the AFP correspondent still in Aleppo, the French news agency. Fierce bombardment also on the southern edges of the city that could be heard throughout the night, although it was quieter by dawn. And there you see a map showing the areas around the city of Aleppo. Let me ask Dr. Zahir Saloul, and by the way, thank you for being with us from Chicago. We were talking at the outset about that hospital being targeted, Sakur Hospital, on Monday. What's the latest you've heard?
I mean, this is the same hospital that I spent my last medical mission in a couple of months ago. It is an underground hospital. It is the major trauma center in eastern Aleppo. It performs about 4,000 life-saving surgeries every year. Just a few days ago, when the bombing was the worst in Aleppo, it received 180 patients, and surgeons took care of them. This is the same hospital that took care of Umran, the child that everyone knows. And unfortunately, in the last week, was bombed 3 times in 3 different days. And the Syrian regime and the Russian have used barrel bombs, they have used cluster bombs, incendiary bombs, and yesterday they completely destroyed the hospital. They used this vacuum
is it
missile.
near a sensitive target, or was it the only thing they could have been hitting?
I think they've been hitting all hospitals, but this hospital is in a neighborhood that is the closest to the northeastern part of the city. That's where many of the activities and the front lines fought between the opposition and the militias of the regime. So I think that's why maybe it's strategic. But most of the victims when I was there were civilians. I mean, these are the civilians who are living in these neighborhoods in eastern city of Aleppo, which is the most poor neighborhoods in the city even before the crisis. And when we're talking about the eastern part of the city, it is not really an enclave. It is a large area of the city. It's multiple neighborhoods. It's about 300,000 right now, from 1.5 million before the crisis.
Both sides are actually equal almost equal in size.
Both sides,
correct.
in geographical size. Zahir Salou, have you been able to speak to doctors this Tuesday, and how many are actually left in Aleppo?
Yeah, I spoke with one of the nurses who worked in M10 hospital, and he was very desperate. I mean, this is the first time I hear these heroes, basically. These are not, normal doctors and nurses. These are people who are very unique, who continue to work now continuously without any interruption, without any break for the past 2 months, dealing with very severe injuries among civilians, heartbreaking to us. I mean, I'm a critical care specialist, but I don't fathom myself dealing with this situation with very minimal resources. I mean, they're running out of IV fluid, with IV antibiotics, with anesthesia medicine. One of the OB-GYN specialists, she's the only female doctor who's left there. She told me that she's using home threads to suture the patients with C-section instead of the surgical sutures because they run out of sutures. And they don't expect to sustain this level of work in the next few weeks if the siege continued. Right now, there are only 4 hospitals that are running in eastern Aleppo, and the number of victims is continue to increase, and many of the victims are waiting for death on life support if they're not evacuated.
Alison Muse, you've reported on the Syria conflict now for 4 years. What have you been able to piece together regarding the latest fighting?
Well, we had the US and Russian-backed truce that was aimed at kind of building a ceasefire and building upon that closer cooperation, coordination between the US and Russia. That has not happened. In the past couple months, we've seen the regime forces and their allies able to enforce a siege on the opposition-held districts. Then we saw the opposition forces with a former al-Qaeda affiliate succeed in breaking that siege briefly. And then the government forces and their allies were able to reinforce that siege again on the opposition side. And this is kind of symbolic of the past 4 years in Aleppo since summer of 2012.
A to and fro that's coming to a head.
And took over half of it.
A to and fro that's coming to a head. There's an important point in all this, Alison. You just touched on it there. Who exactly are the rebels?
Well, you have various rebel factions. From the beginning in the uprising, you had people who defected from the government army. And you had also foreign fighters cross in over the years and become very formidable factions. Supporters of the opposition argue they have risen to prominence because the so-called moderates were not supported by the West. But then on the other side, they've just simply have the most numbers and the most support and have been the most effective. And the leader in that has been now Jabhat Fatah Shem, which is formerly al-Qaeda. And that's been kind of a big factor in creating fear amongst the government side. And that's another reason why the allies of Bashar al-Assad are so willing to put in everything they have into ensuring that Aleppo does not fall, and now they vowed to take over the whole city. So you have this kind of existential battle, but in a way it's been going on for 4 years, and the front line has scarcely changed.
It's scarcely changed, but let me just ask you again, Dr. Saloul, is it really coming to a head this time, or could we see this stalemate continue?
I think we're seeing for the first time signs of things that we have not witnessed before. The intensified bombing on all hospitals, the siege that has been continued right now for 2 months at least, extreme shortage of food and fruits and vegetables, baby milk. All the roads to eastern Aleppo are completely cut off. There's no way in, there's no way out. It looks like the neighborhoods around the city are being taken piece by piece by the Syrian regime and the militias. Just to follow up on the previous question, when I was in Aleppo and a couple of my colleagues were with me from Chicago, we have not seen any signs of Al-Qaeda or Jabhat al-Nusra inside the city. Inside the city, you see mostly civilians who lived in the city. And there's a couple of course, militias, but we haven't seen signs of Al-Qaeda. So maybe you have Jabhat al-Nusra around the city, but not inside the city. And any claims of Russians or Assad regime that they are targeting terrorists, they are not doing that inside the city.
Then why would groups like Nur al-Din al-Zinki or Sukur al-Sham then say they join for the fight for Aleppo? These are powerful factions that have been fighting for years, and they said recently they made statements saying that they were joining Jabhat Fatah al-Sham for the fight in Aleppo. If Jabhat Fatah al-Sham is not there, why would they say that? I mean, I think they made it clear. I mean, all these groups made it clear that they wanted to fight and they wanted to find some form of unification. And the driving power over there is Jabhat Fatah al-Sham ex-Al-Qaeda. So they have the power, and they also have the headquarters from where the rebels are directing their counterfight. We're talking army to army there. What I said earlier on is that the only thing that's different is that the rebels don't have any air power. But apart from that, they have tanks, they have artillery, they have all sorts of mortar, they have all sorts of equipment, and they're very, very powerful and entrenched. So it's not civilian merely being, hit by a government that have massive power. It might be disbalanced, I must say, but the rebels are able to fight, and they're putting on a good fight.
Can
Zahir Saloul?
yes. Can I explain something?
Just Zahir Saloul, go ahead.
I think it's very important to distinguish by who is being targeted and hit day after day in the city, eastern city, which is basically civilians and children. And when we're seeing, for example, in the last week, 240 people were killed and 1,700 were injured. We know them by names, by age, by gender, and all of these are civilians. When I was in the city, I haven't seen any fighters who are admitted to the hospital. So I think this type of talk is really giving support to the Assad regime and the Russians when they say that we are
I'm doing
targeting.
my work. I'm a reporter. I go there and I'm witnessing and I see and I read also. And I read their statements.
I'm a physician.
Yes, and you're in the United States and you're not going to Aleppo and you have not been anytime soon.
I went to Eastern Aleppo 5 times. And my last mission was 3 months just before the siege completed. And I talked to people, I talked to doctors, and I talked to nurses. Mm-hmm. You have some, extremist groups around the city who wanted to break in, and the fighting groups are desperate, and they can ally with anyone who can tell them we're going to help you. The reason that you have this talk now and about allying with Jabhat al-Sham or Jabhat al-Nusra is because these people are desperate. They've been under siege. They are hungry. They have no fruits. There is no vegetables.
So, yes,
there's no water. There's no electricity.
Before you said these groups didn't exist. Now you're saying that the population, out of desperation, is joining these groups. So
they're not
I'm sorry, but this is too.
I have to cut you off, not to stifle free speech, but because
May the lady have a word.
Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.